morning, everybody. We're here at the beautiful museum in Halifax, Naval Museum of Halifax. This is our curator, Jennifer, and she's going to be taking us through. It's not my first visit to the museum, but this should be certainly my most eventful one. We're going to take a look at some of the artifacts and some of the displays, maybe some few secrets, and we're just otherwise going to enjoy ourselves. Bear in mind, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this.
Almost ours too.
Yeah. So there will be some glitches, there may be some shaking of the camera. If you're prone to motion sickness, look away. But we're going to do our best, and we're going to see how it goes. And so hello to everybody that's following us live, and hello to everybody that will be tuning in after we do this later on. So Jennifer,
Hello, Roger.
congratulations on running an excellent.
Thank you very much for that. I have a wonderful team, so I might be the face, but there is an army of people in the background that makes all the magic happen.
Perfect.
We're excited to lift the veil and show you a little bit about some of that magic that goes on behind the curtain today.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Well, welcome. For those of, I know you're very familiar with our organization, but for those of you who are less aware, or we may be a bit of a new entity to you, we are the Naval Museum of Halifax, formerly known as the Maritime Command Museum, for those that go way back. We are probably Halifax's best kept secret in the museum community, but we're trying to change that slowly but surely.
And successful.
Well,
You're now on the stop for the on-off bus for the tourist.
True. All of our metrics are trending in the right direction, but what's really great is that we are one of 5 owned and operated RCN museums. We speak to the entire history of the Navy, coast to coast to coast, and from inception to present day operations. We also dabble in British Royal Navy history as it pertains to the founding of Halifax, the founding of the dockyard, so can't understand where we are today without understanding where we've been. So a lot of the foundation of Halifax history, things like that. We have the benefit of being part of an organization that was founded in 1948. So the Maritime Museum of Canada was founded in the Halifax dockyard in 1948. A group of officers and senior non-commissioned members kind of came together after the end of the Second World War. Some of them had been around to see the disbandment and the impacts of the end of the First World War on the RCN. And what they saw was the similar pattern of just lock, stock, and barrel, everything being sold off. And what they were really afraid was that history and that sort of tangible remembrances of those experiences would all be lost forever unless somebody took action. So what they did was they started collecting. And a lot of these people were very senior members and had amazing ability to collect things. So they established a core foundation collection, which very quickly outgrew what I believe was an old bread factory in the dockyard near the victualling yards. The museum moved up to the Halifax Citadel in the 50s, and eventually it outgrew its space there. So what the Navy and the province, they all kind of got chatting, and what they decided was they would split the collection. The RCN specific things came here to form the foundation of our collection as the Maritime Command Museum, and the remainder residual artifacts formed the foundation of the Marine collection for the Nova Scotia Museum, which became our modern day Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, which is an absolute star gem as well. Probably one of the best maritime museums in the country, if not North America. As a result of that, we have a collection that dates back to 1948 from the collecting period. I think some of our oldest artifacts are from the sort of late 1700s, early 1800s. The Constance from the dockyard in particular is probably, I think, one of our oldest. We have the bell from HMS Shannon coming back, which will probably be, it's been on loan for a long time, so we're really excited to have it come home to help tell that story of the Shannon and the Chesapeake. But what's really, really cool about it is we have almost anything that you can possibly think of that relates to the history of the Navy or the history of sort of military forward Halifax, and even a little bit of RCR material, because this base was actually also home of the RCR regiment. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Is there anything you want to know about the museum before we go and take a look?
Well, I think you covered that pretty well.
I can talk a lot, so feel free to
Well,
jump
I
in
think the
anytime.
next step is to go inside and let's start looking at some stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds great.
Just to let everybody know, we are accepting real comments and questions in real time. We have a very nice lady here with the phone in hand monitoring. She will pass the questions on to them. Also, we want to know where you're from. So when you come on, just go into the comments, say, hi, this is Joe from wherever, or Jane. You know, we want to hear where you're from. We want to know who's following this broadcast. And this is very much a participant event. So we want to hear from you. If you have comments or questions, we want to take them. So this is where things will get a little shaky as we move inside. But we'll do our best to keep the camera still whenever we're talking. So come on in.
Take a minute here and appreciate everything. I think this is a really great space. So for our plan for today, we have 3 floors of exhibits. That's roughly 40,000 square feet of exhibit space. So there's no way that we can capture all that in an hour. And if we capture it all, there's no reason for you folks to come and visit us.
Yeah. This is the tease to get you to come here.
So the hope is we'll give you a small taste of what we have to offer here. Feature some gems from the collection that are on display. Feature our newest art room. I think will be a really great new feature for those that have been repeat visitors. And then maybe a little surprise at the end just to see. And then, yeah, if there's interest and availability, we would love for people to kind of come and explore the whole site.
Perfect.
Excellent. So I think we will scooch in here so you can kind of...
Well, before we do that, I'm going to get you to pan the camera just to the left. This is the gift shop. In here you can get copies of my books. So I encourage you to come in. They will do mail order. So if you're away and can't get here, they will send them to you. And I have to do this as an author because until naval history books sell as well as Harry Potter, I have to plug my books as much as I can. So let's move on.
We've had a couple of people say hello. You have Brad from Hamilton and Rob from Thunder Bay.
Oh, wonderful.
Excellent.
Good. And is HMCS Cataraqui signed on yet? Yeah, good. So a big shout out to the Naval Reserve Unit in Kingston, HMCS Cataraqui. They have a course going on right now, and they've actually made this broadcast as part of their course to the sailors participating. So great to have you aboard.
Excellent. So we will scoot through here just to show some of our art. You can see the bar. And hiding in here is Jennifer Denty, our curator here at the museum, and I will leave you for now in her very capable name.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hey,
Hello,
Roger.
Jennifer. How are you?
Good to see you. So I've got a couple of great artifacts I want to show you that currently aren't on display. So a fun little fact, what you see in the museum is about 10% of our collection.
Yes.
The majority of it does live in a storage facility in the dockyard. So we do our best to try to rotate it. As much as we love Admiralty House, because of its historic designation, we can't really change the footprint of the house, which we wouldn't want to do anyways. But as a result, we have smaller exhibit spaces. So over the last several years, myself and Jennifer have been trying to create new content and to rotate new stories and, of course, topics that we haven't traditionally talked about in the museum.
Right.
So some of these items that we have here used to be on display. A couple of them have never been on display, but they all kind of speak to a really unique part of our history, not only in regards to the Royal Canadian Navy, but of course the Royal Navy and the dockyard and the reason why this house was built.
Right.
So I'm gonna.
Well, just
Yeah, sure.
on that note, having limited space to display artifacts is actually a benefit because it forces the museum to change the displays often. So a lot of museums, you go there once, you see everything, you come back again, you see the same stuff, you don't come back a third time. Here, you come your first time, you're gonna see stuff. Come your second time, you're gonna see different stuff. And you're gonna keep coming back. And that's what these folks want you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, you want to come on over and grab a pair of gloves if you like, Roger.
glasses on so I can see better.
Yeah. So, we have a wonderful archival collection here at the Naval Museum. We've got archival documents that stretch all the way back to the founding of the Halifax Dockyard in the mid-1759, the founding of the Halifax Dockyard. And so one of the pieces that speaks to that early history and the development of that dockyard is this ledger right here. These are always terrible to put on, okay?
And I wore these for a living as a paramedic. I'm out of practice since I retired.
Here we go. So this dockyard ledger dates from 1802 to 1804. It had been rebound. But originally, back when the British left Halifax in 1904, they didn't bother to bring all their documentation and paperwork with them because they had a copy of it in London. So what did they do? They burned it all. So you can see the singe marks on this ledger. It was thrown into a bonfire, and I guess whoever was there when this bonfire was happening decided to kick a few pieces to the side to keep them as mementos or records, or just felt like he should do so. And so this ledger was saved from the fire, and then back in, I believe in early 2000, maybe around closer to 2010, this was donated to the museum. And it's a beautiful ledger. It belonged to Commissioner Ingesfield, who was Commissioner of the Halifax Dockyard in 1804. And as you can see,
Wow, there's a lot of singing on that.
lots of singing, but beautifully preserved. And what this document really documents is the building of the dockyard and all the coming and goings of the Royal Navy and everything they were doing to help to supply the North American fleet and to help establish a permanent naval base here in Halifax. And something a lot of people don't know, Halifax was founded for naval purposes. At the time when Halifax was established, there's no natural resources immediately identified that made Halifax a place where an economy could grow and export. It was something that developed over time because the primary role was to have somewhere for the Royal Navy to moor their ships, to do ship repairs, and to help supply the fleet. Because at that time, they were engaged in several wars and continue to engage in war for an extended period of time. So this dockyard ledger speaks to that history. It's a first-hand account of all of the growing pains of the dockyard, and it's a beautiful kind of description of how it continued to grow and help supply the fleet. So totally invaluable to our collection.
And that history of being a safe harbor carries on today.
It does.
You know, it's one of the most important harbors in Canada. One of, not the, but one of. And, you know, not used just by our Canadian Navy now, but also the merchant fleets, the cruise fleets, and a lot of commerce comes in to Canada through this port.
Yeah.
And it goes out as well.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for the establishment of the dockyard through the Royal Navy, it wouldn't have been there when our Navy was stood up in 1910. So, I mean, such important, pivotal, foundational history to the Royal Canadian Navy, for sure. And kind of along that line is another kind of, you know, not only was the dockyard growing, but people were starting to make history in Halifax. A very famous Haligonian is Sir Provo Wallis himself. Sir Provo Wallis is the longest serving Royal Navy officer ever to serve in the Royal Navy. He was born in the Halifax Dockyard in 1791. His father was Featherstone Provo Wallis, and he was a dockyard clerk. And so these epaulets belonged to Sir Provo Wallis himself. So on June 1st, 1813, he was part of a famous War of 1812 battle called the Battle of the Shannon-Chesapeake. He was on the Shannon when they took the Chesapeake outside of Boston Harbor, and he was the last remaining senior officer standing at the end of the engagement, which only lasted less than 15 minutes. And he was responsible for sailing the Shannon and Chesapeake back to Halifax, which he did successfully. For his efforts and his valiant action during that battle, he was awarded a senior lieutenant rank, which is now a lieutenant commander rank, and he was given these. And so I love these because they did belong to Provo Wallis himself, and he's quite a superstar, and it's just really kind of amazing that here he was, born to a clerk in the Halifax Dockyard and became one of the most important people in Royal Navy history. So
wow.
Really cool.
These are gorgeous.
They are beautiful, and they're so wonderfully preserved.
Yeah. They're like a piece of art on their own with all gold braid and silver, and it's just, incredible to see something like that.
Our archivist has a really great saying. She says, you know that saying, the weight of the world on your shoulders? She's like, they must be referring to the epaulets themselves because they are spun gold and metal. And they're extremely heavy.
Have you ever weighed them?
I've never personally weighed them, but when you pick them up, you can definitely feel the weight of them. And they definitely, after some time, that probably would have been quite, a long way to carry around. So it just, but they're beautiful representation of uniforms from that time period. And we do have a gorgeous uniform room, which you can explore more epaulets like this and some earlier Royal Navy uniforms.
And this just made me think of something. You know, we often say, you know, our Navy today stands on the strength of the shoulders of our sailors past. Maybe now we know why those shoulders were so strong. They had to carry all that weight.
Yeah.
So.
Another great piece in our collection is this photograph album. We have a wonderful photograph collection in our archives that documents our early RCM history from 1910 to present day. This photo album belonged to an individual named Cosette, who actually became a Rear Admiral in the Royal Canadian Navy. And what I love about the album, it just documents that everyday life. So here they're training on the gun on HMCS Niobe, which was the training vessel for our early Navy. Here you have two ratings in their uniforms, and then of course in their typical work dress. So they didn't always wear the uniforms all the time. They did have clothes that they wore on board while they were working. So I just love the comparison of both those photos. And this photo here is actually they're celebrating Trafalgar Day. They had a replica of the victory itself, and as we now know, Trafalgar Day is now HMCS Niobe Day.
Yes.
So I really love that album. It has lots of wonderful photographs. We have images of early leading individuals in the RCN in this photograph. You have a photo in there of Dr. Rousseau, who was the first RCN surgeon, and he was also French-Canadian. So, and he served on HMCS Niobe. So I always love seeing that, you know, we have very few photos of our early RCN leaders, and here it is in this album.
And this is a great photo of the two sailors sitting there, because many people often talk about the uniforms the Navy's wearing today. You know, they've gone back to the Navy blues and the white caps away from the greens of that time we won't mention. And but this shows that square rig has changed and gone through many iterations over the last 117 years.
Absolutely.
You know, so, you know, the caps were different back when Niobe was around. The work dress that these sailors are wearing are completely different from what's being worn today, and is different from what was being worn during the Second World War.
And what I love about the Canadian uniform is you can see that evolution of a very Royal Navy template and becoming our own. We definitely have Canadianized our naval uniforms and given it its own kind of flair to it. And in our, we do have that uniform exhibit. We kind of explore it in that professional perspective of how we've evolved. One of my favorite artifacts here in the museum, being June, very significant. Of course, on June 6, 1944 was D-Day. So what a lot of people don't know is that the Royal Canadian Navy played a very pivotal role in D-Day. 110 Royal Canadian Navy ships were there on June 6th, and over 10,000 Royal Canadian Navy sailors participated in the landings on Juno Beach. They were there to help support protection for minesweeping, and then of course after beaches were stormed, they were there in post-operations. And so Operation Neptune are the naval order directions of the day. And what I love about this document, it has all the maps, all the information of where everyone's supposed to be, but you can see the pencil corrections as they were getting closer and closer to the operation day, they were making changes.
Oh, wow.
Because I mean, originally, the landing was supposed to happen the day before, but because of bad weather, they couldn't go, and those changes are made in Operation Neptune, you see that. And so I've been told this is a very rare item. It's one of three, I believe, that still exists. So it is an amazing.
Now, does that exist in Canada or exists in the world? In the world.
So it's just an amazing primary source of that operation, which, again, very famous. Everyone knows about D-Day. So it's a wonderful piece. And we're actively digitizing our archival collection. And so it's my hope that we can get this digitized and make it available for people to explore.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
That would be incredible. When I did my research on HMCS Trentonian, I found out during the Neptune operation, the very first movement in the timetable was on May 31st from Oban, Scotland, of a Canadian escort group, senior officer in Trentonian, but all corvettes of the RCM, was the first movement on that timetable. So when Trentonian and the other Canadian corvettes left with their convoy from Oban, that started the timetable that led to D-Day. So again, you know, Canadian Navy at the spearhead.
Absolutely. Something Canadians should be proud of. Now, our naval history is so rich, and it's, I mean, over 100 years of it. Of course, here at the Naval Museum, we have a wonderful medal collection. So this is one of our largest medal sets. It belonged to Rear Admiral Bidwell. Bidwell had quite a career. He joined the Royal Canadian Navy in 1915. He was here in Halifax when the Halifax explosion happened. In fact, he actually saved one of his fellow friends from the college when the explosion happened, brought him here to this house that was serving as a naval hospital at the time. And the individual he brought to the house, his name was Orr, and he had lost one of his eyes, but because of Bidwell, he survived, and he actually went on to serve in the Second World War. He was a porter here at the house when it was an officer's mess. So, yeah, it's a wonderful full circle story. From the First World War, leading up to the Second World War, Bidwell served on a series of Royal Navy ships and Royal Canadian Navy ships. During the Second World War, he was in command of HMCS Avalon, and then he was also in command here at STAD, and he ended up retiring in the late 1950s. But what I love is you can see that breadth of his career from the First World War all the way up to the end, and it is beautifully preserved and wonderful representation of some of the medals that our RCM personnel were receiving.
Wow. That's
It's quite a set.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's speechless.
And then, of course, some of my favorite artifacts are the more everyday artifacts. I mean, some of them goes, oh, it's a helmet. I'm like, it's not just a helmet, it's a helmet with a story. So this helmet belonged to William Boyce, known as Bill to his friends. He was a stoker first class during the Second World War in HMCS Huron, and he had joined the Royal Canadian Navy Volunteer Reserve in 1943. And what a lot of people don't know is that by the end of the Second World War, the RCM was the third largest navy in the world, with over 95,000 personnel. It's estimated about that. But
men and women.
Men and women.
Yeah.
And out of that 95,000 personnel, 75,000 of them were volunteer reservists. And so a lot of people don't know that many Canadians left their everyday lives to join the Navy. Bill Boyce himself, his family is from Bobcaygeon in Ontario. And they donated the helmet, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was just before COVID. And this is a wonderful photo of Bill. I mean, you just see the character and the candidness, and he really kind of encapsulates that spirit of the people that served at the time. And as we know, the Royal Canadian Navy Volunteer Reserve just turned over 100 years in 2023, I believe, yeah. So we have a lot of great artifacts that speak to that history and to our naval reservist history, which again, something that, you know, we're trying to actively more explore and talk about in the museum, because we get wrapped up in the official stories. So there's always these everyday stories of everyday Canadians that joined the war and fought for Canada. So those are the ones I really love.
Yeah. Well, and for those that don't know, HMCS Huron was one of our tribal class destroyers during the Second World War, with a phenomenal battle record, involved in some very hotly contested running battles off the coast of France, and was responsible for sinking several enemy ships, and worked with Haida, which is now preserved in Hamilton, and Athabaskan, who was torpedoed and sunk during those operations. And you know, these ships were really, you know, a fighting force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely.
And yeah, when the tribals came, people shook.
So those are just a small taste of what we have here at the Naval Museum of
Well,
Halifax.
and this is what you don't see. So imagine what you're going to see when you come here. You know, and you can tell by this room, you know, beautiful ship models, artwork, you know, an entire library. And some of these books are quite old.
And Gerald Dutry, if I pronounced your name wrong, I'm sorry, he has showed up the Gulf War art over
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're not just talking ancient history here, we're talking, modern times. And it's important, history happens every day. So, and I often say when I talk, what you do today as an historian, I will be writing about tomorrow. So, our sailors, men and women across Canada, are making history every day. And it's so important that, places like this are here to preserve it for future generations. So, where are we going next?
You like to see our new art exhibit?
Sure, that sounds great.
All right, well, I'll let you lead the way. Yeah.
Just a question out there. I want to make sure that everybody can hear us okay. So if you just answer, if somebody can throw on a yes, you can hear us, that would be great. If not, we're going to start yelling at you. So off we go.
We saw some lights come in.
Perfect.
Be okay. Well,
Let's go upstairs.
Sure, yeah. So I'll take you up the main stairwell here in the house. Yeah. So what I love about Admiralty House, it has retained a lot of its historic features. It's a classic example of a Georgian type home. So one of my favorite features is this main stairwell and this beautiful window. This house is purposely designed to bring in light at every opportunity. So if you actually turn off all the lights in the house and take the curtains off all of the windows, it's perfectly lit. It is so well designed.
And not too often you see a 12-foot window.
Yeah, okay. So up here on the second floor, you'll find the majority of our core exhibits. So our new art exhibit is actually just in this room here. So if you want to
Let's
turn
go
the
on
corner
in.
and come on in. So this room actually, back when it was home of the Admiral, was a private office. So back in the day, this stairwell, the servants would have used to get up and down throughout the house. But also when the Admiral had people come visit him or were here on official business, they could use this stairwell, come to this office, and not enter the private living quarters of the house. Which I think is really neat. So, the Naval Art Room. I love the Naval Art collection. Yeah. So we have over 300 pieces of art in our collection. And when I say art, I just don't mean the paintings. I also mean sculpture and other mediums of art that exist in our collection. So what we tried to do here with this art exhibit was kind of give a representation and a taste of what we have in our collection. We also set it up that you can see a progressional timeline in how art is used to interpret our naval history. So we have wonderful pieces that speak to that early Royal Navy history here in Halifax. A wonderful piece of the Commissioner's House and the Admiralty House itself, painted by Pat Burnstall. And then we have beautiful pieces that represent the Halifax Dockyard and its professional history and growth. We have wonderful art that documents significant naval battles that have happened in our history. And we also have pieces that feature people in particular. So, fun fact, in this room, there's a group of 7 artists. Yeah, and so if you come down here to this piece, it's this piece right here. Now you look at that, but that's not the group of 7. Group of 7 are landscape painters. Actually, Arthur Litwiller was part of the group of 7 in Canada. He traditionally painted a series of landscapes, but during the First World War, he was very captivated by what was going on and from a naval perspective. And so he actually painted a series of beautiful paintings that of dazzle ships in the Halifax Harbor. He wasn't an official war artist at the beginning of the war, so he kind of illegally would go down the dock and paint the ships, was caught a couple of times, and then after that, he kind of got official permission to do so. This wonderful piece, he was commissioned to document and draw some of the trawlers that helped protect the Halifax Harbor and other harbors here in Nova Scotia. So it's not a famous piece of his, but it does document that everyday World War I experience from a naval perspective. And so I think it's a beautiful, it's a quiet piece. So if you know who Arthur Litwiller is, it's like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then of course we have beautiful pieces during the Second World War. We have a Beamont here, but also a wonderful piece by Anthony Law, who was not only a Canadian artist, but he also was a commander during the Second World War and joined the regular Royal Canadian Navy Forces post-war and ended up being one of the captains of HMCS Labrador in the 50s.
Right.
But throughout his naval career and personal life, he was a prolific artist and documented his experiences as he went. So here in the house, we have 6 pieces of Anthony Law on display in various exhibits. Yeah.
And he's quite well known in the naval community, not just for his heroics during the Second World War with the torpedo boats, but as an artist as well. And we're not going to show you every painting because you won't have to come, right? We want you to come to the museum and experience this firsthand for yourself.
Yes. But one piece I want to kind of highlight before we leave the room is this beautiful contemporary piece here in the center of the room. We had an artist from Ireland reach out to us. His name's Gary Bennett. What a wonderful individual. He paints a lot of contemporary works that kind of express some of the emotions and experiences of the Navy and of the Armed Forces. So he had relatives that served on the Battle of the Atlantic, and he commissioned this piece for our art exhibit. And what it's speaking to is that loss, that sacrifice that came with the Battle of the Atlantic. I mean, we're very good at telling the stories and victories and the proud achievements of the Royal Canadian Navy during the Second World War, but not very often we talk about the loss. People did lose their lives, did not come back home, and so this piece kind of speaks to the remembrance of that loss and shall always be reverent of that loss. So immediately when I saw works that were similar to this of his, I knew that was definitely the piece for us. And it's wonderful because it allows us to contemporary collect and continue to add to our art collection. So I really like it. It's one of my favorites.
I find this piece quite haunting.
Yes. Yeah.
It's my perspective is, this soul is being pulled from death and being saved, and it's quite incredible. But you say it's the only contemporary piece.
Well, it's not the only contemporary piece. Yeah.
Realistically, every one of these pieces of artwork in its day was contemporary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's only time that changes that.
Fair enough.
So,
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And then quickly before we leave the room, I'm going to get you to turn around and see that beautiful piece there, the oil painting. That was painted by Molly Bobek. She was one of the only female wartime artists during the Second World War. She served in the Army, but she ended up painting a lot of her wonderful pieces. One of my favorite is she painted of a lovely woman, and I apologize I don't remember her name, working in the Northland Canteen here in Halifax during the war. But a lot of her work can be found at the Canadian War Museum. We're very lucky to have this one piece because it was commissioned for HMCS Saginaw, and so when the ship decommissioned, the piece came to us.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Beautiful piece.
Yes, yeah. Is there anything else you would like to see on this floor, Roger, before I take you?
Not yet. Let's explore a little more, and
Okay,
we'll come back down.
All right.
Sure.
So I'm going to take you to a part of the museum that we don't have open to the public.
Okay.
So our third floor, which we currently use for storage, unfortunately is not usable space at this time. But what you see on the third floor is wonderful architectural features of the house and some history of the house itself.
So this is a secret space.
Well, yeah. It's
So we're going to black out the camera. No?
No, we can show
Perfect.
people
Keep the camera going.
It's just not typical space we take people.
Awesome.
So, all right.
Okay.
So I feel like we can head on up.
Lead the way.
Watch your head.
Yes. Yeah, these are very old stairs.
Yeah. Like totally safe.
Look at this.
So, as I mentioned, we currently use this space for storage. Back in the day, when it was home of the Admiral, this is where the servants would have lived. And they would have predominantly worked in the bottom level, which is our basement, where their kitchen and store spaces would have been. And everything in between was the Admiral's residence and working space. So what's really neat about this space is that there's no drywall. So you get to see some of the built architectural features of the house and how it was built. So back when Admiralty House was being built, in its early days, there was a bit of miscommunication about how the house should be built. It was supposed to be a stone foundation and built with wood all the way to the top. Well, somewhere along the line, they changed their minds and they built it from stone brick all the way to the top. So this house is brick, as you see, all the way to the top. And as a result, I believe that's why it has lasted the over 200 years it has been with us. This house was significantly impacted by the Halifax explosion. We lost part of our roof and the house did catch fire. But because the house was built so solid with this brick all the way to the top, I believe that's what really helped save the house and was able to absorb the impact of the Halifax explosion.
It's almost like a bunker on its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can see the house was rebuilt post-explosion. And if you come over here, it's a bit of a small space to get into, so I can show you. This part of the house, the roof was lost. And they ended up rebuilding it. And so all these different color pieces of wood, and you can see they are very different from other parts of the house, is from reclaimed wood post-Halifax explosion. So houses that had been blown down or destroyed from the explosion force itself, they were able to reclaim some of that wood and repurpose it to help rebuild the north end of Halifax. And as you see, some of it was used here in Admiralty House. This is the original part of the roof, and this is a build out. So they were able to add some additions to the house up here on the top after the Halifax explosion. And another wonderful feature that you can see in the house, if you come this way, you can see where they've reinforced the house post-explosion. I've been told they used railroad tracks to help reinforce the floor in our library archives place. But here too, you can see you've got these bricks and then you've got these bricks, which are very different. They are have maker's marks on them from the foundry that they came from. So these are clay bricks, and they actually date back to about the time the house was built. So back in the day when the Royal Navy were building dockyards and the facilities for naval purposes, clay bricks were the bricks to use. They weathered well in cold weather. They salt water didn't hurt them as much as other bricks, and so it was the choice brick. Knowing that, the individuals who built this house really wanted those bricks to build the whole house. So the admiral at the time, he ordered 150,000 clay bricks from a foundry in England and had them shipped over. He wasn't supposed to do that because it was very expensive. The Admiralty had said, look, you got bricks in Nova Scotia. But the commissioner at the time here, Commissioner Woodhouse, knew that he was always constantly repairing buildings and the dockyard wall because the bricks that were made here in Nova Scotia at the time were being cured with salt water and being made with different materials, and they just weren't lasting. And so it was very important that these kind of bricks were used for the house. So after a series of these communications and a couple of hand slaps, the bricks did end up here. And so they did use them throughout the house. And so we're currently investigating some of these maker marks to identify where they would have originated from. So beautiful history, just little pieces of the house history all over the house, and it's just, that's what I find fascinating. You can spend hours from an architectural perspective, historical perspective, a collection perspective in this house. It really is an amazing treasure.
Oh yeah. Well, and you know, if anybody out there is a woodworker, coming in and seeing the mortise and tendon joints and the way the structure has been put together, it is a work of art all on its own.
Absolutely. And
yeah.
What's wonderful too is that parts of the roof, when they were building the house, because they were very conscious about the cost of supplies and reusing materials, pieces of the house are from decommissioned hulk ships. So they would take parts of the ship and then use some of the bigger pieces to rebuild in other buildings. And so some of that was happening here in Admiralty House. We're currently trying to hunt down which ships kind of got broken up and were put into Admiralty House. It's kind of like a mystery and investigation piece that we're continuously working on. So
Well, and you mentioned yesterday when we were talking that it was shipwrights that built the roof.
Absolutely, yeah.
So using the knowledge of a shipwright who builds a ship, this roof actually is constructed somewhat like an upside down hull of the old sailing ships.
Yep, that's because what they do. Yeah, and I think too, again, that structurally was what made it very solid and sound throughout time.
Yeah.
And as, I mean, like, you'll notice, windy today, you don't really hear the wind.
No.
So, I mean, to this day, it's such a
No,
solid
and it's
sound.
not even breezy.
No, it's not.
Normally you would get a draft or something,
Yes.
and it's really tight.
Yep. It's hot up here in the summer, though.
Yes, but
So-
fortunately it's a cool day today.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So yes, this is part of the museum. We don't unfortunately get to show the public currently, but I mean, hopefully in the future, as time progresses, we would love to start utilizing this space because it is a wonderful space to feature.
Well, and it's probably a good time to mention, like all museums, the saving of this level and making it public all boils down to money.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and every museum needs money, including this one. So when you do come and visit, make sure you hit the donation box.
And so a fun fact though, back when we opened as a museum in 1974, it was actually this floor that was the only part that was a museum. The rest of the house was still being used for administrative and as a library and classroom spaces. Okay. And so from about 1974 to 1985, this was the museum. And then when the house was historically designated, we took over the whole house. And so it's just kind of ironic that this is the only part of the house that's not being used as a museum because it was the museum. Yeah.
Very good.
All right.
Lead on. We'll follow. I love this stained glass in the window.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous.
And again, things that some people don't get often see, unfortunately. Talking about uniforms, we can show you our uniform exhibit. It's the smallest room in our museum. We believe the room was originally used for linen, textile storage, and so we thought it was appropriate why not make it a uniform room. So what I love about this room, it is a progressional kind of timeline about the evolution of the Royal Canadian Navy uniform. Some of the neat features here, on this tunic here, you can see the Royal Canadian Volunteer Reserve Wavy Navy sleeve lace. Beautiful Wren's tunic and skirt. We have
you don't often see the Wren's uniforms because nobody really thought to preserve them.
Yeah, and yeah, I've been told we've had one of the largest Wren's uniform collections, which I'm really proud of. And of course, we have a beautiful collection of nurses' uniforms.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. And this room actually used to be a medals display. Then this is why these drawers were built. So when we repurposed it during COVID, we thought, well, hey, it's perfect for these type of uniforms. It allows people to get close and to see them. It's kind of like a dresser. So as we move through time, we move into, of course, post-World War II and then during unification. We have a wonderful collection of uniforms, and we do have a great collection of our unification uniforms. I know it's not what it depends on your perspective of history, how you feel about it, but they are beautiful, and we have quite a large collection. This is a woman's uniform. It's quite beautiful.
Okay. Now, when I wore the green uniform, and unfortunately, because I would have loved to have worn blues, but I gotta say, in this light, that green uniform almost looks blue. So, not too bad.
Not too bad. Post unification, you can see we moved towards more of a black. It's slightly different, and again, that was another way of the RCN kind of defining ourselves from the Royal Navy uniform. So recently, we've been doing a lot of collections work and cataloging our uniform collection, and I've been told to date we have 1,700 pairs of pants. So those pants come with tunics, they come with gun shirts, they come with all the accessories. So we have quite a collection. So this is such a fraction of that collection, and as time progresses, I'm hoping to integrate more of our uniforms into our displays to help talk about those personal stories and the people that wore them.
Well, and that's the potential for a feature exhibit down the road. Is following those uniforms from 1910 to present day, and the different iterations. The work dress, the dress uniform, the mess kit, men's uniforms, women's uniforms.
Absolutely.
And you could write a book on that alone.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that there is probably the oldest piece of uniform in our collection outside of Provo Wallace's epaulets. It dates from the 1880s. It belonged to an individual who served in the Royal Navy, ended up retiring in BC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And those are his medals on display there. So he was in Egypt and serving in the Navy at that time. So it's wonderful. We've got quite a unique collection, and it's always fun to see just the different accessories for the naval uniforms as well.
Wonderful. And I see, you know, there's even some modern work dress,
Absolutely.
you know, so it really is, the exhibits are contemporary right up to present day.
Now, if you like, I'll show you one more thing.
Sure.
On this floor. A lot of people are very interested in our Arctic history and, of course, the Northwest Passage. Having recently launched the last of our Arctic patrol vessels, this room is very popular. So this room talks about our journey to the Northwest Passage as the Royal Canadian Navy. Obviously, it started with the Royal Navy. A lot of people don't know that Halifax actually played a role in that story going into the passage. A lot of the hydrographic surveyors and the people who would end up going to help map the Northwest Passage served here in Halifax and worked out of Halifax, out of our observatory that was in the dockyard. So we tell, of course, the story of Sir William Parry. He made the journey into the Arctic a couple of times. He was actually looking for the North Pole. Unfortunately, he never found it. But he did document his experiences. And from his experiences, people like Franklin used some of the information that Parry had gathered for the journeys that he made into the Arctic. And as we all know, in 1845, Franklin never came back. The Terrace and Uber were lost in the passage. So we do talk about that story and about that journey. But all of those experiences, even though they were not successes, led to the future success of the Royal Canadian Navy making that journey into the Northwest Passage. So that room continues to progress and leads the story of HMCS Labrador, which is one of my favorite ships. It's a wonderful story. The Labrador was the first warship to make the transit across the Northwest Passage in 1954. And they did it in the summer. And even though it was the summer in the Arctic, they still encountered a series of challenges, a lot of ice. It took roughly over 60 days to get across the passage in 1954. But while the Labrador was up there, it wasn't just an RCM mission. They had civilian scientists on board that helped doing hydrographic surveying and early weather detection experiments. So it's a beautiful story. I highly recommend people check it out. Google HMCS Labrador and some of the ventures that they had going into the passage. And so this room features a lot of pieces from the Labrador itself, a few stories, a couple stories about the captains that served on the Labrador. In this room, we also have a couple of totally lost paintings, which I had mentioned before. But one of my favorite pieces in this room goes all the way back to the Franklin. It's a new donation that came to us in the last couple of years, are these beautiful medals here. Wow. They belonged to a family called the Pullen family. The Pullens had been serving the Royal Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy since the time of the Napoleonic Wars. So the relatives of the Pullen family, relatives of Hugh Francis Pullen, who ended up being a commander here at Halifax. These are a couple of their ancestors' medals. These two white ribbon medals were awarded to individuals like Queen Victoria who went looking for Franklin. So after Franklin was lost, there was over a dozen missions to go find Franklin and his lost ships, mostly funded by his widow. She was very avid to try to find him. It's quite romantic. So she funded a lot of these personal missions, and Royal Navy officers who went on these missions received these medals. There are only 1,500 medals that were ever issued, and we have 2 of them, and which I think is wonderful. And of course, the individual histories of the Pollens that went, they were 2 brothers. The first Pullen went 2 times, and then this Pullen, Thomas Charles Pullen, went once. So it's such beautiful history, and of course, beautiful family history. Fun fact, their descendant, Hugh Francis Pullen, was the founder of the museum itself. He was very avid historian, avid about preserving history and the collection, and so he played a very pivotal role in the finding of our museum. And so we're very proud of that.
Wonderful.
Yes, and their family is lovely.
Well, and it's nice that you're able to get the 2 pair, because you can observe display both sides of the medals, which normally you don't get to see.
Absolutely.
And you know, the front of the medals and the back are both equally, you know, artistic. So yeah, they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Now, I believe we have one more item I'd like to show you. So I'll give you back to Jen Denty to show you that final item in our collection.
We thought since you were here, and it's a piece that you are familiar with, you might appreciate seeing our newest artifact. So this is an artifact that is brand new to the museum and is in the process of being conserved and preserved, but we are happy to share a sneak peek with you
I can't
and with
wait.
your own mind as well.
Because, you know, this artifact I was a point of contact to get this here, and we'll talk about it once we see it. It's probably one of the most important artifacts to come to the Canadian Navy ever.
It's one of the more
What
important
it
that I've ever
symbolizes.
encountered.
What it symbolizes.
Shoemakers out such a busy while we
That's good.
were touring. I'd like to take this opportunity for you to see the bell from HMCS TRENTONIAN. So as you can see, as a result of being in the English Channel for an extended period of time, it shows all of the life and character that a ship's bell at sea would have, and all of the impacts of being underwater. The sediment and crustaceans that you see are very much a part of its history as much as the inscription of the ship's name, and it is a hugely moving artifact. We have an extensive bell collection, and for us, and I think most people, a ship's bell is really the heart and soul of a ship. It keeps time, it raises awareness in times of danger, it is the heart, and it's...
And it's turned upside down to become a baptismal font.
So,
To baptize the children of sailors on board their ship. Those children's names become engraved and become part of that bell.
it really does.
And
What is particularly unique about this bell for this museum is that in our, what do we have, 90, 100 ship's bells from paid off ships or that are surplus because they're full, this is the only one from a ship lost at sea that has come to us.
you know,
And so,
and a ship lost at sea with lives lost.
exactly.
You know, there were 6 sailors killed in Trentonian on 22 February 45 when it was torpedoed by the German U-boat U-1004. 5 of those men went down with their ship. 1 died on the way into Falmouth, and he is buried there. But the other 5 remained with their ship. So Trentonian is a war grave. Unfortunately, this was an artifact no one ever expected to see, because it is an art, it is a war grave, and it, morally it should be left untouched.
But as it is here,
Yeah.
we are so humbled to be able to be a place to see that it is cared for properly, so that when it comes out of the water, it can be stabilized. We will not remove the entirety of the sediment. We will clean it up, and we will preserve it, and we will stabilize it. But the barnacles and the casings and the sediment are as much a part of the history of this piece as it is in its day it was cast. And for us, this is a very rare and unique opportunity because the concept of being lost at sea is so cerebral. We talk about people making the ultimate sacrifice, but unless there's mementos, memorabilia with the family, we have nothing that speaks to that loss. And this bell represents that opportunity. Trentonian was a hugely important ship from so many perspectives, but that illustrates the ultimate sacrifice. Would you like a closer look?
Yeah.
All right. It is heavy. So,
Well, we're talking brass and bronze.
exactly. So, all right. Now, Mr. Eric Cameraman, if you scoot over here, I'll switch places with you.
Sounds good.
Because it's easier to hold from the hanger. We should have rethought my
Okay, folks, I don't know how clear the picture is, but you can see Trentonian. HMCS here. Trentonian comes across here, and you can just make out the commissioning year in 1943 here. Wow. The sailors can tell you you know, their bell is their heart and soul of the ship. It represents the ship, and it represents the sailors. Many a sailor has spent hours with brasso and rag, polishing these bells.
If you've seen our Saguenay bell, you can tell.
Yeah, myself included. And, you know, so it's an intimate love-hate. Love your bell because what it symbolizes, hate it when you have to polish it for hours on end. But, yeah, sadly, the engraved bell is the only marker on the wreck of Trentonian to identify that wreck. And it's now no longer with that ship, marking the graves of those 5 sailors. But here, you know, it represents them. It's the only bell that has come from a wreck of a ship, Canadian Navy ship. And I know it will be honored and revered, and people will come and be able to learn.
It came home. And on that very somber note, thank you for coming.
I didn't think I'd be affected by this, but I really am.
Wasn't our intent to make you so moved?
Well, writing my book, White Instant Flying, about Trentonian, I talked to 20 survivors, and many of them were very willing to tell me personally their experiences on that day. You know, where they were when the torpedo struck, what happened next, you know, what happened to them, how they survived, how those that died, how they died. And each one was quite emotional. Their voices cracked, tears flowed. I hear their voices. I think we'll call it quits.
Fair. Very fair. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And sharing this time with us.
Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Come to the Naval Museum of Halifax. You will not be disappointed. And thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.